Hi, this is Siobhan de Maré, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is Siobhan de Maré of...
former lead singer of Mono and Violet, Indiana.
Also formerly of Swoon. Fantastic interview. She did it over Christmas break.
Yeah.
Let's get to it.
A lot of fun.
Good night.
Night.
And welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Hi, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hello, lovely to speak to you both.
Well, thank you for your willingness to participate. Thank you for all the correspondence.
Yeah.
We're excited to have you today.
So excited to be speaking to you too.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let's get right into this. Recently, Mono, the Formica Blues album was re-released on BMG. Can you talk a little bit more about your involvement in getting this album re-released?
So really, it was a case of just giving it the go-ahead, the thumbs up, really. So they contacted me and said that they wanted to re-release it, which is exactly what they've done. It's available on all platforms, and apparently it's doing very well. So that's really the long and tall of it all. We're not doing any promotion at the moment. I think Martin, who's the other part of Mono, didn't really want to start doing live gigs or touring or anything, but I've done a couple of interviews and just keeping it all open, and I've had quite a few offers to do different tracks with different people over the world, throughout the world. So I'm just that's really what's been happening with the Mono re-release.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, well, I was listening to that today, and there's a batch of remixes too that are accompany the album. Can you talk a little bit about the remixes? Were you involved in picking people to do the remixes? I actually
wasn't. Okay. I'm ashamed to say that I think they probably did send them to me, and I probably just said, yeah, they'll be fine. I think most remixes I've heard have been amazing, so I'm not too picky about it. But I'd love to hear them again if they're out there.
Nice.
When Formica Blues was originally released in '97, was it only released on the CD format, or were there any vinyl releases back then?
I think there were some vinyl releases, because as you know, there definitely were, because I've got some in my garage, or garage, should I say. So there definitely were, but I'm not sure if it was the whole album. I think some of the singles were released on vinyl, and maybe a few hundred copies of the album. So they're probably, quite valuable now.
Absolutely. At that time, were there any copies released on the cassette format, or was that long gone by then?
I'd have to go to my garage, to the archives. I really don't know.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, do you remember when the first time you heard about the song Life in Mono was going to be used in Great Expectations? How did that make you feel?
I did. Yeah, I remember hearing about it, and the most exciting part was the fact that it was something connected with Robert De Niro, that he was going to be in the movie. So I've always been a huge fan. So, and obviously Gwyneth Paltrow was in it, and it was such a great film. So yeah, when I first heard it, I thought, how exciting! I'm actually going to be used in a film score. So that was, it was a huge door that opened, and we got to come out to America and tour and go on the RuPaul show, and I think Conan O'Brien, and do loads of interviews. And I think Madonna came to see us at the El Rey Theatre in Los Angeles. So it was kind of amazing. It all just happened so fast.
Yeah.
And it was at a point that Martin and I, we really didn't know each other very well. So it was a bit of an arranged marriage. And then we got to know each other after we'd said I do and realised that we would never really be in love. So it was a bit complicated.
Well, here's the thing. So 97 is a special year for me. It was my first year. I became a school teacher in 97, and I taught in a small school district outside of where we live, about 30-minute drive. So I would listen to Formica Blues side A on the way there, and I'd listen to side B on the way home. And with that being said, it was such a big part of my young teaching career in my, I guess maybe my travels back and forth. But can you talk a little bit more about the writing and recording process for the Formica Blues album?
Again, that was all it was a strange process because Martin and I, we met through our manager. We didn't really know each other, and we got this deal based on, I think he'd written Life in Mono, in fact, and he asked me to come and do a demo vocal on it. And I went to go and do this vocal, and then I think I went off to LA, and then I got a phone call, and they said, look, all the major record companies have heard you singing on this track, and they all want to sign you as a band. And we were like, well, we did meet in the studio once or twice, but we're not really a band. And then it was like, well, you need to get an album together now because they want to sign you and they think you're a band. So they said, don't eat too many burgers, get back to London, and we will go and meet them all, and we'll choose a label to sign with. So I was like, okay, so, sorry, it's Martin, is it Martin Virgo? And he was like, yeah, that's me, remember, you did that session. Came back to London, and then we started meeting all these major labels, and then they were like, right, so what's the album going to be like? And we were like, and so we got in the studio, and then I think we did definitely have creative differences and ideas and arguments, and I think it just kind of evolved. So we'd start, he'd play me an idea, or I'd sing him a melody, and then we'd kind of come together with it, have a few arguments, and then somehow there would be a compromise of a track, and then the album was born. So it definitely wasn't easy. We hadn't known each other. We weren't working together for years. We didn't particularly even get on. So it was a bit tense, actually, which maybe that came out in the music as well. But it's amazing. Sometimes people that aren't necessarily the best of friends or the best, I don't know, the best combination of people, they make great music. And that's kind of how we were. It was slightly awkward even touring together, but we could make these songs come together really, really very well in the end. So cool. That's why, it was only one album, sadly.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the tour? You guys did a 5-date tour in 97 and a 21-date tour in 98, coming to North America. What was that like?
That was kind of okay. I think we did Europe as well. We had a massive tour bus, and then we flew out to America. It's all a bit of a blur because I went on to be in another band after that, and we went around America as well. So just kind of trying to remember, thinking back to mono days. There was a whole load of us, and even our musicians. It was a bit like, do you know anyone that plays guitar? And do you know anyone that plays keyboards? And where can we get a drummer from? So we just sort of rung around people we knew that could play instruments and said, do you want to be in our band? Nice. And they were like, okay, and we've been signed, so we've got to go and do all these gigs and TVs. And so we just grabbed a few musicians that we knew, and they became part of the band. So, and I think America was really exciting because it was sort of connecting with the movie and the soundtrack. And so we were getting really good press, really good reviews, everything was rolling. So it was a really exciting time for both of us. I think Martin was probably a bit more afraid of the the successful side of it, like it was going way too fast for him. Whereas I was like, come on then, let's do the next album, bring it on. When we're doing the next TV, I was really, kind of looking really forward to that kind of career. But I think he wanted to be more of a studio background type of guy and wasn't really wanting to do loads of interviews, videos, TV, whereas I couldn't wait. So we were complete opposites as people.
Well, I wanted to bring this back to the studio portion. As you were in the studio creating this album, and like you said, you barely knew Martin at the time. As the finished product, did you feel like as though that you guys were onto something? Did you feel like that this was, you caught lightning in a bottle, like this was something special?
No, I never do. Whenever I do anything, I fill myself with self-doubt and think, is it any good? Is anyone going to like this? I don't normally feel any, and I can't normally bear to listen to things afterwards for a while. So I was quite surprised with the response. I thought, that's really interesting that people, they're really zooming in on these tracks and asking me about the lyrics. And, so I was pleasantly surprised at the response to the album, knowing the background of the story. It was strange because, you hear people that have been working on albums for years and, gone to music school and just done all these different things. And we just weren't those people. I think Martin is exceptionally talented as a producer. So I was very lucky to work with him. And then I think the combination we just got lucky, really.
Oh, from the way it sounded, it was like what the brilliance of the recordings of the songs. With that being said, would Martin and yourself ever entertain having a reunion of sorts to try to rekindle mono ever again, or is that pretty much a done? Is that
we did try?
Yeah,
we definitely tried. Like couples that get back together and try again. We tried, and we even tried to do a new album. I think it was maybe about, maybe 7-8 years ago. I think we met up and we started this new album, and then we started kind of the same issues came up again, and we had different ideas about how we wanted it to sound, how we wanted the lyrics to be. So I think he wanted to write the lyrics, and he said, I'm going to write all the lyrics. And I said, oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, yes, I am. And I said, why would you want to do that? And he said, because I think that my lyrics are better than yours. And I said, well, why did I then go on to write all these other great lyrics with another band? And then he said, well, I don't know. I just think mine are better. So I said, okay, well, you know what? You can leave it. And I remember we were in this coffee shop in Richmond, and then I think I paid for the coffees and stormed off. And then he said, you're going to regret it. And I was like, no, I won't. And then I don't think we spoke again for years. And then I think we had to speak about just different things. Where I think one of the track Air Kissing got used on a game. And so we had to speak about, what was it? No, sorry, that was that was a totally different story. That was my next band. I think for some reason, something that we had to do that was being put on an advert or something, we had to speak again. And then that was it, really. We never got together. We never had another coffee, and we never saw each other's faces again, which is really sad. Yeah. Occasionally, we might just send a message for something, for clearance of something, but it's sad. He's moved out of London and our lives have gone in different directions. But, it's life, isn't it? Sometimes you win some, you lose some.
Well, let's kind of move on here. In the early 2000s, you teamed up with Robin Guthrie of the Cocteau Twins fame to create Violet, Indiana. Can you talk a little bit more about the history of the band and how you and Robin crossed paths?
Well, that was really weird. So that was the breakdown of the mono situation and the transition into the new beginning. So my record company, they really didn't know what to do when the band were no longer working together. Mm-hmm. And so they sort of had to figure out what they could do with me. So it was like, well, what do you want to stay signed to us? Do we keep you? Do we drop you? Where do we go with this? So I said, well, I really don't know what I'm going to go on and do. And then my A&R woman at the time, Ingrid, she said, well, I'm going to send your tracks out to a few people and your voice and see how it goes. And then a week later, she said, have you heard of this guy from the Cocteau Twins called Robin Guthrie? He really loves your voice. And I was like, no, but my sister really loves him. He's kind of indie, right? And she was like, yes. And I said, okay, I don't mind meeting up with him. And the next thing he called up and said, hi, do you want to meet me for some sushi? And I was like, sure. So we met up, and then I think we ended up going back to his studio at the time, and he started strumming along on the guitar. I started singing, and the next thing we had a friend of his called Scott that was managing Bjork at the time turned up, and he said, "You guys are amazing together. This sounds beautiful. Why don't you do an album?" And that was it. Then we started working together, and we became a band, and we started touring, and he had his own record label. So he said, "Look, if your label want to sign us together, we can stay signed with them." I think it was Chrysalis at the time and Echo Records, or we can carry on with this through my label, which was Bella Union. And that's how it kind of went from there onwards. So it was a very exciting time, and it was nice because he was so different. It was like he was kind of one of these guys you work with that says, just sing, write, do whatever you want. I don't touch lyrics. I don't touch melodies with songs. Just you go and do what you're doing, and I'm gonna do the music, and you're gonna do the lyrics and the melody. So I was like, wow, this is so refreshing, and it worked really well because it was the opposite to the last band. But it lasted a few years, and then Robin moved to France, and we just kind of went in our separate directions as well. But an amazing time, a great experience, and also a very talented producer and musician. So I was very lucky twice with the people I got to work with.
Oh, so cool. Looking at your discography for Violet Indiana, and you guys had quite a few EPs and then 2 full lengths. Was that an EP format something you prefer, or which one do you like better, the long LP or the EP?
I'm not too fussed really. As much as someone wants to listen to, it's because I'm not the one that's going to buy it. However someone wants to receive music, or however many tracks they want to listen to, I've never really been too involved in the technical side of it all, or the, what would be better to release. I'm just like, great, how many songs on the album? When's it going out? Am I going to get any money out there? Yeah. That's how it's always been.
I know you kind of already answered this question, but I guess maybe I can try to rephrase how I wrote it out here. How did the creative process differ from Violet Indiana to Mono? I know you said Robin kind of let you flow with the lyrics and everything, but as far as the sound sonically, how did it differ from one another in the studio?
I think so. With Martin, it was a bit more rigid and a bit more worked out before I got there, and he was quite intense in how every single sound would be, how I would sing a vocal, make sure I don't use any American inflection in my voice when I'm singing. So, he was much more rigid with the boundary of what would work and what wouldn't, and he would maybe obsess a bit more with the finished product. Whereas Robin was more kind of like, just go with the flow, and that sounds great, and don't worry if you've got cold today and you're still singing, we'll record it. So he was, and everything was much more, I would say maybe a lot more fun with Robin, without being too disrespectful to Martin, but a lot more kind of like, just, we'd literally go for a coffee. This is how it normally worked with Robin. We'd go for a coffee, have a chat, and he'd say, what's going on in your life? And I'd tell him something, this is happening, or just broken up with my boyfriend, I'm in pieces, and this is what he said last night, and this is what happened. And then he'd go, really? Why don't you put that in a song? And then I'd go, okay, and then he'd get his guitar out, and we'd start strumming, and then bam, that was a track. It had a title, and it was normally a banger. It normally went really well. So I did kind of like that process a lot more than the more strict one, which was Martin. Martin was more strict, and Robin was probably a lot more fun with recording. And I hope they never get to hear this, because they're probably devastated.
Perla is my favorite track, Violet Indiana track.
Perla, yes.
It's probably the sexiest sounding song I think I've ever heard in my life. Can you take us back to the recordings of that track and the lyrics to it? It's just a phenomenal song.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So that particular song, it was quite, it's about underwear. So that's probably why it comes across as quite sexual. And for me, it was, I had gone to Italy on a trip to Italy, and I'd found this underwear shop called La Perla. And I remember thinking that is just my favorite underwear in the world, the quality, the texture, everything about this underwear. And then I just thought about, how a woman maybe would feel wearing that underwear, and a kind of like a purring sort of perla, and a woman purring for this underwear because she's so enticed by it. So that's how that song started. And I think I was having a conversation with Robin, where I think he nearly dropped his coffee as I was explaining to him about the underwear. And then it was like, right, better get my guitar out then. And then it became a track. So I don't think I've ever discussed that track with anyone before.
Well,
so it probably comes across in the lyrics.
It's just so captivating. I'm so glad I know the story behind it. Now I know I'm so attracted to that song.
Yes, that's probably why.
Oh, very good. Jeff, you got the next one?
I was just going to ask you about the track Killer Eyes. Do you have a story behind that one?
Oh, gosh. Well, that is quite a dark song. I do have a story connecting to it, though, but it was, Killer Eyes. We actually shot a video for that as well in Paris, in this really rough kind of, like a red light district in Paris. And we were in this motel. It was all quite scary. And as I was actually shooting the video, because I'm like this kind of high class hooker in these white ankle boots, and I'm killing my victims. They're coming up to this hotel room, and then I'm doing the do, and then kind of stilettoing them. So it all gets a bit Kill Bill. But I remember as we were shooting the video, there's all these sort of local guys wandering around, and they think that I really am what I'm doing. So it just got really awkward.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we're doing a video. They're approaching me and speaking to my manager and like, how much? And he's like, no, we're doing a music video. And they're like, yes, I pay. And it's like, no, that's not what we're doing. So I remember feeling like, it was all quite strange, and it was all sort of shot in a day in Paris in the red light district, and then coming back to London and looking back and thinking, should I have made that video? That was kind of like, not quite sure about that. Because I used to get a lot of directors and stuff, and they'd hear the lyrics for my songs, and they'd meet me, and then they'd come up with a storyboard, and it'd be like something like, and then you've got this beautiful silk underwear, and you're like strangled, and you're in the boot of a car, and your lipstick's like dripping, and your eyeliner's all smudged, and you're really beautiful. And I'm like, why does everyone have this narrative? Maybe it's because it's got a bit of a Twin Peaks feel to it, or maybe it's that kind of like Parisian kind of ingenue, slightly a film noir thing. I don't know what it is, but it was always that sort of storyboard. And I was like, it's interesting how that comes across. Maybe it's the sound of the guitar against the sweet vocals. I'm not sure, but it was quite intriguing at the time.
Well, after Violet, Indiana, Gary Bruce and yourself created Swoon. The music took a kind of a darker direction. Can you give our listeners a brief history of Swoon?
Oh, so Swoon was when I was probably in the darkest phase. I didn't really want to do any more music again, and then I kind of tiptoed out, and I was a bit like, does anyone want to work with me again? And then this guy came forward and was like, I do. And I was like, oh, do you know how to play guitar? And he was like, well, yeah, I haven't done anything like you've done, but I'd like to work with you. So I was like, okay. So we got together, and I think we kind of created this album. It did take a while because I wasn't really very tuned in, and I think he was kind of trying to figure out where we could come together and make something that would have some sort of continuity from my past. And then I got approached by this label, I think, what were they called? Summary Records. And they said, we want to release anything you're involved in. And I said, well, I've got this album I'm working on in this guy's attic that I've met. And he said, okay, send it over. So I was like, quick, Gary, there's this guy. He actually wants to release it. He said, no way. And then we kind of, we released his album, and I don't really know what happened with it, but I don't remember getting any checks at the end of
it. That's it, huh? There's nothing else you can tell us?
Well, I'm trying to remember the songs, and I think we did get, I think what was in it. I think we did get a couple of things in incidental music, and I think it was pretty good for what it was, because it didn't really have major exposure or anything. Two people getting together, and people kept saying, oh my goodness, it sounds like a Bond film. Everything you do sounds like a Bond film. And I'm like, well, I need a Bond film.
Yeah,
it's great that they all sound like a Bond film, but I need the Bond film. Yeah. So I do try to get that out in every single interview, hoping that one day someone will go, Siobhan de Maré, Bond film, and it will happen.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah,
Jeff,
we need that.
Yeah. Jeff, you got the next question?
Well, I mean, I guess I was just going to ask about that, a little bit of the 60s jazz influence in the Bond film type thing. You know, what are some of your influences for your vocalization?
Well, I don't really have. I know I get asked this a lot, and I don't kind of think in my head that I'm trying to sound like anybody. I think I just sing from my heart, and I've probably got loads of influence unconsciously from music I've been brought up listening to and music I love, from the Ronettes to, anything from, I don't know. Then I went on to listen to a lot of soul music, which never really comes out in my music, from Jill Scott to, I don't know, anything, Donny Hathaway. There's so many things that you maybe wouldn't detect in the way I'm singing.
Yeah.
But I just love any music that you can feel someone sincerely is singing from their heart. I used to love Prince. I've listened to such diverse type of music, a lot of jazz, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday I grew up listening to, even the Everly Brothers, Elvis, you name it. Anyone that sings and you can feel they've got this connection or they've had some heartbreak, I'm there. And that's how I try to sing. So I never profess to be an amazing singer, but I always say I'm definitely, without sounding too pretentious, a communicator. And if I've communicated an emotion across and someone can feel it, then I've won.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Taking this a totally different direction, you recently had a poem published. Can you talk a little bit more about your poetry writings and the publishing of your poem?
Oh, yeah. So basically, a friend of mine was working for a charity for children that were amputees, and they were children in different countries that couldn't afford to have prosthetic limbs after having an accident. So they were raising awareness, and there was a family in London that had their daughter had lost a limb from a tragic accident, a car that corroded into the side of the road, and she was a ballet dancer. She lost a limb, and they thought, you know what, we can afford a prosthetic limb, we can look after our daughter, but there's plenty of children all over the world that can't do the same. And so they were raising awareness, and they started this charity called Elizabeth's Legacy of Hope, and it was all about that. So then I got approached. I think Joanna Lumley was involved. She was one of the patrons, and a friend of mine called Catherine Bieber. And they said, we'd love you to submit a poem. We know that you're really good at songwriting, and would you be able to think of a poem? And it's all about resilience based around these children. And I said, definitely. So I got my coffee out, my pen, and 10 minutes later I forwarded it. And then 2 weeks later I got an email, and it said, your poem's going to be published, and could you come down to this event and read out your poem? And that's where it went. And then after that, I thought, you know what? I love writing poems because it's like very similar to the songwriting, and poetry was always my first love. So I'm now going to do my own little poetry book with my illustrations, and that's my next project for the new year.
Oh, very good. So I have one more question for you, and we'll leave you alone for the evening. Sound good?
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much.
So, I asked this question to all of our guests. The mystery of rock and roll is kind of gone now with the dawning of the internet and social media. Back before the dawning of the social media and the internet, we had this great mystery of our entertainers and rock artists. Where is your head at as far as an artist goes, and for a fan? Do you like the accessibility that social media has given us? Because if we didn't have social media, we wouldn't be doing this with you right now. Or do you miss the mystery of rock and roll?
Oh, there's a question. You know what? I think you have to move with the times, and I think it's a good thing, really, because you can just download tracks. You can, obviously for artists it's a bit difficult because we don't, there are artists like maybe David Bowie or something. There's never been another David Bowie, and there's so many people that had that sort of enigma and mystery, and getting tickets to go and see someone that's all very exciting. Now you can just press a button and you can hear the artist or see the artist or watch them on YouTube. But I think it's just really a sign of the times. So as sad as it is, it is the world we're living in now. So I think it's amazing that I can sit here on WhatsApp and do an interview with you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to promote or plug?
No, that was fantastic. I'm so grateful that you got in touch with me.
Well, it's been
it's been fun.
It's been a pleasure. This is how things are going to work out. We're about 3 to 4 weeks behind on our episodes, so this one will probably be released toward the end of January. Would you think, Jeff?
Yeah.
So as soon as Jeff, the editing wizard over here, gets everything cleaned up, I'll send this to you, and please share it on all your socials.
Of course I will. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Take care, guys.
All right, I'll be in touch with you in about 4 weeks. Sound good?
Perfect.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks very much. Take care.
Take care.
Bye now. Happy New Year. Bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye.